The archetype, Rimuru Tempest XT Bait by Estix. 13. Back to Xyrus. The ride to Xyrus from the capital was as uneventful as it gets. Carriage rattling over cobblestone roads, horses trotting at a steady pace, and the occasional bored glance out the window. Nothing to write home about. Except the fact that I'm the Grand Marshal now. As usual, Aaliyah was passed out beside me, her head resting against my shoulder like it was the most natural thing in the world. I didn't even have the heart to nudge her awake. I mean, it wasn't like it was bothering me, she wasn't exactly heavy or anything, and it wasn't like it was the first time. Across from us, Caspian, who had somehow wormed his way deeper into my business, was watching me with this half-amused, half-intrigued look, like I was some kind of interesting bug under a magnifying glass. "You two look wonderful together. Romantically," he said, his tone suggesting he thought he had made some profound observation. I stared at him blankly, unsure whether to be annoyed or just outright baffled. "Why does everyone seem to forget I'm 17 years old?" I asked. Caspian just shrugged, unconvinced. "You look the part. But you don't feel and act the part. I think everyone sees that." I snorted. "You're speaking from lack of experience. This is why you're hopeless when it comes to love. Quote. Do you have to be so cruel?" Caspian shot back, his voice genuinely wounded. "Cruel? Nah. I'm just being real with you. I listen, and I don't judge," I said, tapping the side of my head. "At least not out loud. Big difference." "I can't believe you," he muttered under his breath, but I wasn't really listening. It wasn't like I cared what he thought. I leaned back into the cushion, trying to push his words out of my head. "Anyways," I said, changing the subject. "You're reading way too much into this. She's just a friend." Caspian's lips curled into a smug smirk. Sure. Just a friend who happens to fall asleep on your shoulder. That's not exactly platonic, my friend." I sighed. This was exactly what I didn't need. I wasn't about to get dragged into some awkward conversation just because Aaliyah was asleep on me. It wasn't like I could move her. I mean, I could, but that seemed unnecessarily mean. "Would you drop it? She does that all the time. You make it sound like I've got some secret love affair going on." Aaliyah stirred next to me, the carriage hitting a bump that made her jolt awake. She blinked groggily, rubbing her eyes like she had just woken up from a nap that could have lasted days. Her hair was a mess, wild and tangled, looking like she'd just rolled out of bed. Which, in all fairness, she basically had. "Hey," she mumbled. "Hey," I replied, nudging her gently. "Caspian thinks we're in love or something." Aaliyah chuckled softly, still half asleep, and shot Caspian a half-hearted glare. "Of course he does. He's always looking for drama." Caspian put a hand over his heart, feigning injury. "Drama? Me? Never. I merely observe the world around me," he said, practically purring the words like he was some kind of philosopher. I rolled my eyes, while Aaliyah snickered. "Yeah, sure you do," I muttered, leaning back again and trying to ignore the fact that Aaliyah had kind of settled even more comfortably on my shoulder. Not that I minded. She wasn't exactly the clingy type, and we'd known each other long enough for me not to make a big deal out of it. For a second, Caspian looked at us both, his eyes narrowing slightly as if he was putting pieces together that weren't really there. "So you're telling me, you're just friends?" he asked, his tone dripping with disbelief. "Yes, Caspian," I said, keeping my voice as neutral as I could. "Just friends. Nothing more. Stop overthinking everything. You two are so weird," Caspian muttered under his breath, though I could tell he wasn't quite convinced. He was still eyeing us like we were a puzzle he couldn't solve, and honestly, I wasn't even sure what kind of answer he was hoping for. "Yeah, we know," Aaliyah said without missing a beat, resting her head back against my shoulder with a content sigh. "We're experts at it by now." I had to stifle a laugh. Yeah, we were definitely experts at making things unnecessarily complicated for people who didn't get it. But whatever. If Caspian wanted to make a thing out of it, that was his problem, not mine. I glanced out the window at the passing scenery, trying to zone out as best I could. The journey to Xyrus was tiresome, and there was no point in stressing over things that didn't matter. There'd be time to think later, but for now, I was just going to take it easy. It was at this point that Caspian leaned forward once again. "Speaking of observations, I noticed you've been spending quite a bit of time with Aya Greffen lately. I kept my expression carefully neutral, though I could feel Aaliyah stirring with interest beside me. Great. Just what I needed. Both of them ganging up on me about this. We work together. It happens. Oh. Aaliyah's voice was suddenly very awake. Is that what you call having breakfast together 3 times this week? You're keeping count now. Someone has to, she replied with a smirk. Especially since you seem determined to pretend it means nothing. I sighed, watching a flock of birds pass overhead. Because it doesn't. We talk about work, eat some admittedly excellent pastries, and then go our separate ways. It's hardly the romantic epic you're imagining. As you wish, Grand Marshal Rimuru, Caspian drawled. And I suppose the way she looks at you is purely professional too. The way she. I caught myself and scowled. Don't you two have better things to do than speculate about my non-existent love life? Aaliyah shifted, making herself more comfortable against my shoulder despite being fully awake now. Nope. This is much more entertaining. You realize I'm still underaged, right? Physically, maybe, Caspian pointed out. But we both know that's not the whole story. Besides, Aya doesn't seem to mind. Ayo. Aya doesn't. I stopped myself again, realizing I was falling into their trap. You know what? I'm not having this conversation. Which is exactly what someone in denial would say, Aaliyah chimed in helpfully. I looked down at her. Weren't you supposed to be asleep? And miss this? Never. She grinned up at me. Besides, you're comfy. I'm beginning to think you're not really my friend at all. Just someone who uses me as a mobile pillow. Multitasking, she replied cheerfully. I can be your friend and use you as a pillow. I contain multitudes. Caspian watched our exchange with that annoyingly knowing look of his. You know, Rimuru, for someone who claims to be just friends with everyone, you sure have a lot of beautiful women in your life. Don't start, I warned him. I'm just saying. First Aaliyah Triskan, now Aya Greffen. First of all, I held up a finger. Aaliyah is literally sleeping on me right now, so if you think there's anything romantic going on, you're sorely mistaken. And secondly, I paused, realizing I didn't actually have a good follow-up for Aya. Secondly, Aaliyah prompted, clearly enjoying my discomfort. Secondly, you're both terrible and I'm considering finding new friends. No, you're not, they said in unison, which was frankly disturbing. I turned back to the window, trying to ignore their matching grins. The truth was, I didn't know what to make of Aya. She was complicated. Every time I thought I had her figured out, she'd say or do something that completely threw me off balance. You're thinking about her right now, aren't you? Aaliyah's voice cut through my thoughts. I'm thinking about pushing you both out of this moving carriage. Violent thoughts, Caspian noted cheerfully. Classic sign of romantic frustration, Or maybe it's just a sign that you're both incredibly annoying. You love me, Aaliyah said confidently, snuggling deeper into my shoulder. Debatable. The carriage hit another bump, and Aaliyah used it as an excuse to poke me in the ribs. Just admit it. You like her. I admit nothing. You sure? Your face admits plenty, Caspian replied. My face admits that I'm seriously reconsidering my choice of friends. But even as I said it, I couldn't help but smile a little. They were annoying, yes, but they were also, well, mine. My friends. My incredibly nosy, persistently annoying friends who wouldn't let me brood in peace. Aaliyah was one thing, but Caspian really was my biggest plot twist this year. And although they were absolutely wrong about Aya, they were growing more insufferable. I checked my watch as the 3 of us got out of our carriage. 1:25 p.m. We left Ediston City in the early morning and it still took us till noon to get to the teleportation gate to Xyrus. Both Lance Aaliyah and guild leader Caspian stretched behind me as I surveyed the surroundings. And where are you headed next, Rimuru? Aaliyah asked me as she went to buy a drink in a nearby stall. To the academy. I'm supposed to meet with the director there, so I'll pass by my house first and get a change of clothes. I replied, buying myself my own drink, one reminiscent of soda. The pleasant fizz popped in my tongue as I gulped it down, the cold liquid bringing a wave of refreshment after the long and hot morning ride. How about the 2 of you? Aaliyah held out her hand as if asking me to give her a moment while she chugged her own drink. Poof. The past few missions have been really draining, so I think I'm going to need my beauty sleep back. I have guild matters to take care of. Some of my staff has been acting cocky while I was at the capital. Caspian said beside me, fetching himself a chewing gum. Great. I'll be on my way, then. See you guys later, I said, turning around and waving them goodbye. Bye, the both of them called to me. With that, we parted ways. Zyrus was as busy as ever. The streets were full of adventurers off to work after having lunch. Tables littered the stalls, messy and with flipped chairs. My villa wasn't far from the gates of this floating city. Only half an hour away and I'm there. I could have taken another carriage, yes, but I felt stiff and cramped from riding one all morning. Even though it's physically impossible for me to feel sore, I wanted to stretch anyways. Soon enough, my villa came into view. I slid my keycard into the panel at the gate, and there was a click as a magic core circulated its mana and the gate opened. I was greeted by a villa that's more practical than ostentatious. A rising cobblestone pathway led towards a manicured garden with well-cared plants and trees to the left, and to a central fountain to the right. I walked forward up to the front door of my house. What greeted me was a cold and empty air, a welcome embrace from the loud sprawling city outside. I kicked my shoes off to the side and made my way straight to the kitchen. I opened the magic fridge and fetched myself some water, letting the frigid and fresh liquid cool me down from the heat of the midday. No one greeted me. I sulked to myself, putting the now empty glass by the sink. I turned on the faucet and washed my face. Though it could be because they don't know what I look like, I reassured myself. I pinched myself in an attempt to humble my previous daydream, where I arrive in Zyrus in a dramatic entrance and hordes of citizens will look up to their new Grand Marshal in awe. Respect, reverence, and admiration, all directed at me. But reality was far less glamorous. Virion had insisted that my reputation should be built on exploits rather than formal announcements, and while my name, Rimuru Tempest, was already known, it seemed that recognition wasn't as instantaneous as I had hoped. I shook off the disappointment and turned off the faucet, which has been running without use for quite some time now. I grabbed the towel near the counter and dried my hands before going upstairs to the master bedroom. Tossing my jacket into the bed like an irresponsible teenager, which I technically am in this world, I opened the door to my walk-in closet and carefully chose what to wear. A plain polo. I held it up in front of my chest and checked myself in front of the mirror. Aesthetic, but overused. Today called for something more sophisticated. I was heading to the academy, and schools, academies, in particular, were the perfect places to leave a lasting impression. Teenagers thrived on gossip, and I wanted to give them something to talk about. While I was confident that my immaculate face card alone was enough to turn heads, pairing it with the right outfit would solidify my image as both charismatic and authoritative. News traveled fast among curious students, and I intended to make the most of it. I rifled through the closet, fingers gliding over various fabrics. I settled on maroon trench coat, black turtleneck, and dark trousers paired with deep red dress boots. I wanted to look aesthetic but without seeming like I tried too hard. A quick glance in the mirror confirmed I looked presentable as a Grand Marshal, maybe even a bit sharp. Finally, I fixed my hair and adjusted my coat. Felt nice and just right against my skin. I donned on photochromic glasses and finally made my way outside. Since the academy was a bit far from here, I was going to take a carriage. This is something I figured I need to address later. I have a mansion, plenty of money, and a closet of the most expensive luxury branded clothes and accessories, but I'm commuting. Should I hire drivers and maids? I mused to myself as I glanced out of the window from the carriage. The air felt chilly up here in Zyrus, always. Well, that's to be expected from a city that's literally floating amidst the clouds. Moments ticked by as the driver finally stopped the carriage. "We're here, sir." I handed him the appropriate payment and stepped out. Classes were ongoing, but a few students with vacant periods were roaming about the campus. I adjusted my glasses and walked to the front gate, closed because of school hours. The guard, probably already debriefed by the director, bowed respectfully. "I greet the Grand Marshal," he said with a polite tone as he opened the gate. I waved him off with a hand and entered the campus. At least this guy recognizes me. Hopefully the students do, too.